Hi, welcome to the Legislators Lounge. Today is our 7th show, and I'm Jim Webb, and my co-host is Brian Chirichiello. And today we have with us Representative Mary Till from Derry and Representative Betsy Burtis from Derry. Welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome, ladies. We hope to have all the Derry reps to interview them eventually at some time, but we had asked you two to come in as a freshman, and the only 2 Democrats out of the 10. So again, welcome, and maybe we'll start by asking a little bit of background about yourselves. We'll start that way. How's that?
Sounds good.
Great.
You want to start, Mary? Or?
Sure.
Okay.
I was born and raised on a farm, and I have a large garden, so growing food is something that has been a hobby of mine for many, many years. I have 2 college degrees. One's in social work and one's in mechanical engineering, which is an odd mix, but it worked. It worked for me. I'm currently retired, and this is the first time that I've been elected to the state legislature.
Great. Betsy?
I was born and raised in Western Massachusetts, in Pittsfield, where almost everyone seems to know somebody from there. I was interested in politics at a very early age. I spoke in my junior high debate on the side of Gerald Ford. That was probably the last Republican that I supported. And I have been in Derry for almost 21 years, have served on the Zoning Board of Adjustment with Jim, have served as a trustee of the trust funds, also with Jim, and was on the search committee that helped interview the town administrator, town manager candidates when John Anderson was ultimately hired. And so I've just been interested in a while in serving the community and being part of the goals of helping Derry thrive in our state.
Great.
Well, ladies, I'm glad to have you on the show. And one of the biggest things that I think to ask, especially you being freshmen, and this show is actually titled, Freshmen's, because you're the 2 freshmen this year. So I would kind of ask you, is the State House what you thought it was going to be going up there this year? Just jump right in.
Actually, it is and it isn't. When we went through the freshman orientation, I was amazed at how hard everybody worked to make us feel comfortable, to make us feel like we understood what was going on. We didn't, but we felt like it. And then I've also been impressed with the congeniality that exists. I think that what makes the news are those handful or more bills where there's policy differences, but the vast majority of the bills, there's actually a lot of consensus on how best to run the state, and I was pleased with that. I don't see people who are being contrary just to be contrary. Well, there's a few, but mostly it's not the case.
I was very nervous about serving because I am working full-time and happily in Concord, so that makes it easier to juggle. But I was very concerned about how I was going to manage the time. And with the exception of a few weeks, it's actually been easier to manage than I thought. So if there are people in the audience that have thought about running for state rep but have been worried about the time commitment, there is certainly a great time commitment. But if you've got a flexible employer, as I am lucky enough to have, it is something that can be managed. And I also, I agree with Mary. I think the orientation process was really great. It was amazing to me how truly like freshman year it was. You're looking around, you're trying to figure out who your friends are going to be, you're looking at who the cool kids are, right. Who am I going to eat lunch with, all of those sort of basic emotional, visceral things that we think about when we first go to school. And it was very similar to that. But it's been a fascinating process. I love watching processes take place and how the group dynamic and how everything works, and just from that level, it's been fascinating to be a part of.
Absolutely. And what about when we all got sworn in for the first time when you're in that hall with 400 other reps? I mean, wasn't that something? And you see the pictures hanging up on the wall.
The governor comes in and swears us in as state reps.
I mean, it's just a kind of a special
And
feeling.
the history of the State House itself, you know, we're the oldest, longest serving State House that's still has an active legislator in the entire country. So there's a lot of history in New Hampshire, a lot of history.
Let's talk about committee assignments. I'm on transportation. I know Jim is on fish and game. So Mary, you're
I'm on election law.
Yeah, and tell us a little bit about that committee.
And Betsy's also on transportation.
I'm on transportation with Brian.
Right, we're actually on the same committee, which is great. The
Yeah.
committee's awesome, actually.
Yeah,
by
it
the way,
is a
we'll
good
get
group.
into a little bit more on that. The election law committee, what kind of bills do you typically see there?
We started out with 32 bills that originated in the House, and I think we've picked up another 3 or 4 that came over from the Senate. We've been looking at a lot of bills that have to do with the town clerk's job, because the elections have become so complicated lately that town clerks are spending days and nights from the whole weekend before the election through the election, just preparing for, trying to get all the papers in order, and then counting the votes and getting the votes tabulated and sent off to Concord. And they're all saying there's got to be an easier way, and so a number of bills have come up where we try to deal with that. And of course, we had 2 bills that had to do with the photo ID law. One was going to take us back to where we had been before 2012, I guess, where, and I think that's pretty much the way it had been almost from the beginning of time.
Right.
Then the second bill, well, all right, so the photo ID bill implements in 2 stages, and the first stage started last November, where a lot of different IDs were allowed, and people who didn't have IDs could sign an affidavit, and then they would be checked out later by the Secretary of State and Attorney General. Then the second part of the law decreased the number of acceptable photo IDs dramatically, affecting one of the major groups that certainly have been affected would be college students, because
college ID,
they
right.
no longer will accept the college ID. And then there's also the requirement that if you didn't have a photo ID when you went to vote this coming September, they would actually have cameras there, and you would have to sit down and get your picture taken. They
That
would
was part
attach
of
your
the
picture.
original bill, right?
That was part
town
2
clerk
of
would
the,
have a camera to take your
of the
picture.
original bill, right?
Oh, that sounds kind of complicated for a big town like us, or maybe Manchester nationally.
Yeah,
Well-
if you think that the town clerks were too busy before, wait until we start doing this.
There were quite a few people that, well, there wasn't all that many people that were inconvenienced by the photo ID. From what I saw at the different places I polled at, there was a few that had to go out to their car and get their registrations and whatever have you, and that was what they used. But I didn't see a major issue with it in Derry. I mean, not a major issue anyway.
No.
And the rest of the state, I guess there wasn't any kind of major issue neither. They did find some fraud, from what I hear from the Attorney General's office.
No, I think you heard wrong. I don't think
There wasn't a lot. No, there wasn't a lot.
They
but
haven't found any
well,
fraud. They
okay,
have
well,
found
people that didn't return the required paperwork to complete the process when you file an absentee ballot or when you file one of those affidavits.
Right. The Secretary of State sends out a postcard to people that basically says, if you got this postcard and you are who you say you are, send it back.
Right, and those people didn't do it, so maybe
And
they
a
weren't
lot
who
of
they
the
were.
people, I mean, there were many people who objected on both both parties objected to the idea of having to show a photo ID in order to vote. And so some people had the photo ID in their pocket but refused to show it. Those same people are very likely not to send the postcard back, right? I mean, they're trying to
protesting the process.
The process,
Well, yeah,
right?
there was people that were going to protest anyway and just make it harder for the town clerk.
Right. So you know, right now those are counted in that list of questionable voters. And it will be up to the Attorney General then to send somebody out to the address, try to track the people down and find out if they're real or not.
Now you said that it was on both sides of the party. I'll tell you, absolutely correct. Brian voted against it. I voted for it. So,
Well, I don't even,
and
but I'm not even talking about how you voted on the bill. I'm talking about the voters coming to the polls.
No, I understand that, but when you were saying when it was passed and all that. But,
Yeah, it was another one of those bipartisan votes.
Yeah, so it was one of those things. And most people were happy. Actually, so I've seen people that were happy that we did that. I've got a lot of emails
Well,
thanking me for doing
That
it.
whole issue is pretty intense. I mean, I can
Yeah,
understand
we could spend a whole
California and
show on
Arizona,
that.
but,
Right,
New Hampshire,
right.
New Hampshire's New Hampshire, but we could get into more
Yeah,
detail.
we could
But
spend a whole show
Let's
on
go
that.
into
Yeah.
Transportation Committee and Betsy.
Yeah, I was going to say that the two things about the committee and the whole House that have been surprising and interesting to me, and I think it does link to this conversation, is that sitting on the sidelines, you think things are pretty black and white.
Okay.
Things are very simple when you're just reading about it in the newspaper or on a website. It seems pretty easy to make a decision on how people should vote. That is not the case. There have been many topics, bills at both the committee level and at the House level that I walked in thinking I knew exactly how I was going to vote. And when you start to listen to both sides, you realize how incredibly complex it is and that there are really good arguments on both sides of the issue.
Well, case in point, we had the topic yesterday in our committee, when we met yesterday, and I thought it was going to be a simple one, was the Purple Heart license plate.
Yes.
And the testimony that we heard was pretty intense on both sides.
It was.
I thought it was going to be an easy subject, and it's like,
Yeah.
Wow.
it was really intense, and I mean,
So that's the one thing that has been surprising. The other thing is that, again, sitting on the sidelines and hearing what the media reports, the media, I think, tends to report on the things that are very heated.
right.
And
exactly.
it is portrayed as things that are very partisan. And the reality is that the vast majority of the work we do is nonpartisan or bipartisan.
Right.
And that's actually a relief to me. I mean, that's a very pleasant surprise that that's the way it is. And I'm also glad to see that things are complex and require us to think a little and to not make easy decisions. I think this kind of TV show and letters to the editor that we write, things like that can help the average Derry citizen understand both sides of an issue that allow us to help educate and inform are wonderful because it's good critical thinking skills to be able to see both sides of an issue and not just say this is the only way.
Right. And one of the reasons why we did the show, I mean, a lot of times you see TV, on regular TV, it's 10 minutes, and each side gets 5 minutes because it's very limited in time. Here we can actually dive into some of the details, and I think putting it on YouTube or Facebook, people can actually take their time and look at it whenever they want. So I think that's important. Like you had mentioned, getting the details on TV, is a good way to go.
One of the things, I counted, bills up to the numbers in the 700s. Other people have said there's been 1,000 or more. I don't know, maybe they're counting the Senate bills. But that's more bills than any one person can read, even if they devote 24 hours a day to it. So what I have been impressed with is the committee process, the importance that each committee plays, because they're the ones that sit down. They all have, every bill gets a public hearing. So these committee people sit and they listen to the testimony on both sides, and then they come up with recommendations. And I depend a lot on what the recommendations of those committees are.
Well, and then you have to look at the state of New Hampshire. We have some really good qualified people, and the people of New Hampshire have to understand that we don't get paid. We do this, we volunteer for this service. It'd be a state representative. It's a non-paying job in the state of New Hampshire for the most part.
Well, you didn't get your $100?
Yeah, you get $100 a year, but by the time you get through buying the business cards and the license
right,
plate,
that's right.
and they take taxes out of that too, by the
Yeah,
way.
I know, yeah.
So by the time
As
you're
they
through with
should.
all that, you really don't. And like last year, we weren't even getting paid mileage for most of the second half, because after January, you don't get paid mileage.
No,
So-
after
Right.
June.
June 30th or January 1st, we didn't, and then there were a lot of calls for us to go up there for one particular bill, which I won't mention, but that's beside the point. But like I said, it's a volunteer, but we have a very high quality of people that volunteer to go up there and do this. And when you listen to the testimony, you listen to the people that are submitting these bills and the complex bills that they are, you say, wow, we're lucky to be in New Hampshire and have this quality person living here.
So let's talk about what bill sticks out most in your mind that we've dealt with so far this year. Anything at all that...
As a
Well,
freshman, yeah.
I mean, I hate to bring it up, but I'm sure the most important vote that I'm going to pass, that I'm going to cast this year is going to be on the casino bill. It's the one bill that's been the most controversial through the entire legislative session.
Right.
And it is bipartisan, and it is very controversial.
Right, now we're taping, this is May 15th, I believe. We haven't brought that up to the floor yet. It hasn't been brought up as a vote yet.
Right.
But
Right.
you, like Mary had mentioned, you can feel some of the pressure, people talking about it, you're seeing it in
it's
the news. So.
constantly being brought to emails that we get. I just got a letter in the mail today from somebody, a gas station owner, a former state representative from Salem.
Right.
And there's a lot of people that actually spend a lot of money to send that letter to 400 reps, I would think. That would be kind of expensive to print it, send it, and all that.
Yeah, the
So-
amount of lobbying has been impressive in both good and bad ways.
Right. Now, what do you think about in the bill where it says that neighboring towns of the casino would actually make a certain amount of money? We know that one site is Salem. We also know another possible site could be Hudson. Either one of those sites, Derry would be a neighboring town.
So
Derry's not a neighbor of Hudson, is it?
Yeah,
I
it
thought I looked
was-
at the map and we just kind of
well,
got
we
cut
just
out.
barely get
We can
Salem.
barely get Salem, I know.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
we would
There's
get
a
a portion
spot
of
in
that.
Hudson, I believe, as well.
Okay.
But anyway,
in any
we'll double
case,
check. But what are your feelings about, I mean, we're a tax
Well,
cap community in
the-
Derry, so this is money that actually could, if you think about it, could be used to lower property taxes, because if they get X amount of money coming in every year, whoever sits on the town council could decide to use that money to offset property taxes. And we all know that property taxes can be very high in this community. What's your thoughts about that?
Well, I actually think the road toll bill is a better way to cut property taxes. But going to the casino bill, the issue there is the reason that budding towns are getting money is because they expect the problem gamblers to be within 10 to 30 miles of the casino, and that means they're going to live in Derry and surrounding communities. And although they have state police who are going to oversee the activities on the casino grounds, when people go home at night, when they beat up their wife or steal money from a cash register or whatever, that's going to be in the local town, and it's going to be up to the local towns to deal with that.
Well, I think that's a little extreme. You're saying, okay, 10 to 30 miles. Okay, let's go 35 miles. You're at Suffolk Downs. So now we still have the same problem, because
I'm not sure that Mary's
but yet we don't
saying
have
that there are
money
gonna be
coming in
these-
to pay for it.
Right,
No, I
but
didn't-
that's
that's
the
why-
philosophy
why
of
the-
why that a butter money is in there, is that the assumption is that whenever you build any large
Well, it creates an
social
inconvenience, too.
environment, even if you build a Walmart, crime goes up. There's traffic, there's
Traffic.
increased traffic,
yeah.
there's all of those things. So
Associated
the
costs.
money coming in is supposed to be used to help offset the costs of increased police needs.
Infrastructure costs.
Right.
Right.
And healthcare needs
So-
for problem gamblers.
But also, I mean, if you look at pros and cons, now the last number that I heard is that if it went into Salem, they'd have to spend $700 million for building. So that also helps the people that are looking for jobs in the town of Derry.
I'm sure.
So it works both ways, you know. So it would benefit some of the people in Derry. They'd have a job
Well,
building the infrastructure in a neighboring town. So
that bill definitely has its pros and its cons, and we actually have had 2 shows on that
Yep.
bill. One was all pro, and the other one was pro-con kind of combo. But we did have the people that that were against it come in and say their piece, and we discussed that quite a bit, and those can be found on our webpage, which is derrylounge.com, or our YouTube channel, which is Legislators Lounge, if you just search it. But either way, that bill will be, I think, the most important bill this session.
Right.
Or this, well, I don't know. We said we're only halfway through. We're only in the first year of the session. Who knows what's going to come up next year?
well, let me ask a question, because what I was reading is it went to committee today. It got narrowly defeated they actually had 3 different separate committees talk about the gambling bill, and it failed by 1 vote today. Now, the whole House has not heard it all, but when reading the paper, I had heard that on the Democratic side, I mean, the governor supports this, and she's going to be asking some of the Democrats who are either undecided or leaning the other way, you may be getting some pressure, if you haven't already. I don't know. I mean, you may want to speak about that. You may not want to. But have you seen anything at all that way? I mean,
Well, Maggie, Governor Hassan, and I have been friendly for a number of years. I was a big supporter of hers during the campaign, had her to my house for a house party. So she had contacted me several weeks ago at this point and asked to meet with me to discuss a variety of issues. But yes, gambling definitely came up. She wanted to know where I stood. I told her very honestly where I stood, and I didn't feel really any pressure at all. It was a thoughtful dialogue with her presenting her case, which I think is a strong one in favor of gambling. She received more votes than anybody else in the state up and down the ticket, with a very clear message that she was supporting gambling. So I think that the popular support is definitely there. I wrote a recent letter to the editor because I surprisingly hadn't heard from many of our constituents, one way or the other. And I've been very torn about where I stand on it. It has been just so much information on both sides. And I got probably 25 or so people that have contacted me either via email or phone, and it's about 3 to 1 in favor of gambling. I think a lot of people in favor of gambling are following the money. They think it's going to reduce our taxes, that it's going to be sort of the second coming. It's going to infuse our state and town economy with everything we need to solve all of our problems.
I don't think that will happen.
And I don't think
but
that will
it
happen
is. I look at it as that it's non-tax revenue. So it's revenue that's going to come into the state that would not burden our people with as taxes.
Right.
Whether it be a fuel tax, as Betsy had mentioned earlier that she's in favor of, which I'm totally against as a resident of Derry, and knowing that most of the population of Derry leaves every day to go to Boston, and to add another 12 cents a gallon on the price of gasoline is just something that at the high point when my wife was paying $600 a month to work in gasoline alone. That's just
All
not
the more
acceptable.
reason to get commuter rail in.
I'm not
Well,
opposed.
Another whole show
I'm
on
not
that.
opposed
That's our
to that.
committee that we've actually talked about. As a matter of fact, they actually pushed that over for another year. They didn't allow us to talk about rail at all this year. So I'm sure that'll come up again. But on the gas tax, I was reading that today in the Senate basically did not vote for the gas tax on their side. So that's an interesting.
Well, they've been saying
anticipated that
all
at the end.
along that both the road toll bill and the casino bill were going to be head-to-head in the conference committees at the end of the year when they try to pound out a budget.
Right.
I mean, one concern about or one of the quote-unquote selling points about the casino bill is that it will help finish 93.
Yes.
Well, there was a
Will help
large
fix
portion of it to go to
our
93.
Department of Transportation will get a lot of money from it. But what they have found out is that they can't bond based on gambling money. They
Because
can
it's
bond based
potential,
on
it's not real.
on the road toll bill. They can get a bond. They can finish 93. If we wait for the money to come in from the casino bill, it could be 6 years from now. And if 93 isn't finished sooner than that, we're in trouble.
I think it was 2016 they were talking about they could actually get it up and running, but who knows if that changes?
Well,
we don't know.
then it comes into another bill that was in that was just the road salt bill, which
Yeah, what
I know
happened
you
to
and I
that?
sponsored it. Were you on that one too?
I don't think I was on that one.
But that one there was heard yesterday in committee.
Oh,
Right,
it's still alive?
no, it's still alive. It's not dead yet. Now this is a major issue because 93 can't expand unless that bill passes or unless something happens with that bill, and people don't understand that. The federal government's shutting it down now because there's too much salt going on the roads. So,
But let's take a look at what's going on around us, right? They've already started from exit 1 to exit 3. They've made the improvements. They're making the improvements on 111, right? Exit 5, work off of exit 5, so they've got that. If they don't complete this, it's just gonna, it doesn't
no,
make sense. The
what they're
puzzle
gonna-
doesn't make sense.
They're going to do is they're going to build the bridges. They're going to put the road in. They're only going to pave it for the whatever lanes that the EPA will let them. That's it.
Still
you're not
doesn't- it
gonna
doesn't
gain
make
any-
sense to me,
Well,
but-
you know, I'll throw out there that typically the Republican side believes that we have a spending problem in the state, and typically the Democratic side believes that we have a revenue problem. So
I believe we have both problems.
Your argument that, well, it just doesn't make sense and it should get finished somehow or another doesn't really fit with the we have a spending problem.
No, I mean,
side.
again, I think it's the options that we have available. We have the casino. If that comes in, we've talked to Jim Roush, Senator Roush, who said that there's money aside there to actually complete that, as well as 4A, which is a whole other topic. The gas tax, we talked to Dave Campbell, and he said there was money in for that as well. So either one would work for us.
Right.
What doesn't work is if both get squashed, then you've got another issue, you know. But
I mean, there's money in the road toll bill that's going to come directly to Derry that totals up to almost $900,000, I think.
Yeah, he went over the numbers, and you know, Derry doesn't have any red listed bridges in it.
But it's got red listed roads.
Well, and then we went over. We did a show on this too, by the way, folks. You can tune into our YouTube channel at Legislators Lounge, and you can watch that show. And we went into quite detail as to what's red listed and what's not, and what red listed even means. Because a lot of people are a little bit. It's like some roads might be red listed that just because the turn is too close to a bridge. Right, then nothing wrong with the bridge, but it's just there's a turn too close, so it's red listed. So a lot of it's not real. It is and it isn't. It's been that way for the last 100 years. All of a sudden, it's a problem. So I don't know what to say about that, but I'll just say that you know that's a whole nother show that we did already on the gas tax and all that.
I mean, I think there's a lot of people, professional people, who think it's a problem. It's not like somebody just decided, I'm going to put in a bill and get a whole bunch of money into the state because I'll say it's a problem. I think there's a lot of agreement
that bill
there's a problem.
could have passed if it wasn't so much. If they had went for just like a couple of pennies a year, and made it 6 cents instead of 12 cents, it might have passed.
And that's, Jim,
And
that's a good
maybe
point.
it'll go to committee of conference.
That's
and that'll
exactly what I was
happen.
going to say. It could come out
Well,
still.
it's probably going to happen anyway, because from what I understand, it was attached to the HB2, which is a Christmas tree bill.
Yeah, you could find a combination of the both, actually. So
Yeah.
But it's going to take more than a couple cents to fix the Sarah Long Bridge, I think. I mean, we're not just talking about the roads.
Well, if the boats keep
Derry,
hitting
but-
it, then we'll be all set. They'll get it fixed for us for
well,
nothing.
let me ask you both a question as the Democrats. Bill O'Brien's bill, he had an amendment
Yeah.
that basically said that some of the money gets diverted to Department of Safety, and he wants all of the highway money 100% used to repair these roads and bridges. What are your thoughts on that one?
Well, my first thought was, gee, why did we spend all that time passing a speed limit? If we're not going to have any state police, we don't have to have any speed limit. We could have saved a lot of time.
Well,
like
that's in
the
our
Autobahn in
committee. Well, in our committee, we actually raised the speed limit on a portion of 93,
I know.
and
And
I
it
think we're
passed the
going to
House and
see.
Senate.
Yeah, we're
we'll see
trying to
more.
do a show on that. We're trying to get a show together on that particular bill.
Yeah,
do you
I
think,
think the issue is what his amendment wanted to cut out of the Department of Safety, and it essentially decimated the state police. And no, I don't
But-
think that's right, and I don't think that's the appropriate thing to do.
What his argument really was, if you think about it for a second, is let them come to the state and say, this is the money that I need. Why? I mean, it's kind of, you know, I didn't realize until we found out that some of that money that goes to the gas tax money is actually being what they call diverted.
Yeah.
It's only 73 cents on every dollar that's actually going to the roads. And if roads are a problem, why aren't we saying, let's put 100% in and fix the roads that need to
The
be
gas
done,
tax was
versus taking
originally
some of that money
intended
out.
for.
Well-
And let the state troopers say, this is the money that we need, you know.
I think some of the debate during the time that bill was being considered was that I don't think that the state police budget is totally funded out of the highway money. I think that the general fund also kicks in, and so that's where if they need more money, they come to us and we pay the difference. If that money were not there, then one, we would have to take out more general fund money to pay for the police, which means it would have to come out of education or health care or any of the other zillions of priorities that the general fund tries to accommodate. So, I mean, I think that was the biggest issue that certainly swayed me.
Well, let's get back into the committees, because you mentioned committees was very important in the House, and they are very important. But a lot of people don't like, you must be getting the emails on this, the plastic that they put in on the packaging for the food, right? And there was a bill, and the bill's pretty much dead right now, right?
Plastic?
Are you talking
The
about,
GMO labeling?
GMO.
Oh,
That's not the plastic, it's what's in the food.
Oh,
Right.
okay, but that's pretty much dead, that bill, right now, because it's
still
retained,
It's
so
retained,
usually.
and the Agriculture Committee has had 5 work sessions on it already. I
Think-
mean, they're working hard on that bill. I don't know what's going to happen
It's
to
going to
it.
be almost impossible to enforce it for just New Hampshire.
Well, they don't have to enforce it
But
for
that's
just
a-
New Hampshire.
Right, I mean, that's a states' rights issue. That's what we go for. We
So we
like
limit
things that
all,
are-
all food that comes into New Hampshire to be labeled like that?
Actually, they're
You
they're
can't
they're
do that.
talking about an amendment that would have a level that has to be met before it goes into effect, and that's either 5 states or 20 million people or something like that. But think about this: New Hampshire was the first state to pass a lottery bill, and now it's all over the country. And it was also the first state to pass a same-sex marriage bill without a court order. And it's now, in every state in New England and 20 other states, I think. It's just been, Minnesota's just passed it. I mean, New Hampshire is not afraid to set priorities, to plow new ground. And I think that
Speaking of plows, New Hampshire was also the first state to use rock salt.
so. We're going to be the first state to get away from it.
One of our mistakes, which we're trying to get away from right now
Right.
because of the sodium levels in our water, which is one of the reasons why we have all the problems with the highways and building them and all that right now, which we talked earlier. But the committee work is important, and the biggest problem I found as a freshman last term, I was a freshman as well as Brian.
Right.
And when I was a freshman, when we were going through the bills that came through the House, they came through so fast, you had no clue what you were voting on. And you'd have an iPad there, or I have a Droid version of it, and you'd be trying to look it up to see what you were voting on, but you couldn't get it quick enough. And it'd already passed, boom, gone. And it's like, wow.
Yeah, I learned that early on, that there is no time. Once Speaker Norelli pounds
Yeah.
the table and opens up the House, there's no time to be studying the bills. If there's
Yeah.
no debate,
If there's any question at all, you got to yell for a division or a roll call or something to slow it down.
But that's why we get the calendar almost a week ahead of time.
Right.
So that as you scan through, if there are things that are of concern or interest to you, you can go and read it.
The calendar isn't exactly 100% neither, because it's based on whoever writes the blurb.
Right, but that's
But if what I'm saying is you see the calendar, you see what's on the docket for the coming week. The calendar comes out on Thursday for the next Wednesday.
Yeah.
So you've got 6 days that you can go through, look at it, say, oh, this is one I've heard about, I want to know more. You go read
Right,
the bill.
if you hear about that, you're right. That's what I'm saying. Not the ones you hear about, it's the ones you don't hear about. That's what I'm saying. They just fly through.
well, I think
on
that's
consent.
why it's
But that's
important
why
that
I'm
we're on
saying to
committees
scan it.
too.
Well,
you
yeah,
know? I
and
mean,
I
that's
think you
what-
need to scan. You have
Right.
to scan the calendar. I mean, I don't read word for word, but I
Right.
quickly go through and I look at what that day is going to be like, so that I can plan
Right.
my world around that. But it's also to see what's the content, so that.
I mean, I will look, if I'm looking through it and I'm reading a bill that I know nothing about, one of the things I look at is what was the committee vote? And if it was 0 or 1 or 2 to 18 or 19, it's like, you know, this.
Usually,
I think I'm gonna
yeah,
go
it's a
with the committee.
bipartisan. If in that case it
If
becomes
it's closer to
bipartisan.
50-50, I'm going to go in and I'm going to read the bill and I'm going to think about it and listen to the arguments.
But that wouldn't be on the consent calendar, so that wouldn't fly through. That would probably, if it's going to
Well,
be 50-50,
sometimes they
it's
fly
probably
through
going to
when
be
they're
an
not on
argument.
consent calendar.
Yeah.
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 You know. But yeah.
So it is interesting being up there and watching this stuff happen, and as these bills come through and come in front of you, and then sometimes when you get back from lunch, what I found last year, if you get back just a little bit late, they've already voted on a bill and you didn't even know
Right,
it.
now this is, I mean, as freshmen, we know, I haven't seen it this year at all, is staying very late and getting locked in.
Yeah.
That
Yeah,
hasn't
you
happened
you
this
haven't
year.
experienced
No,
that
I
yet.
know.
Yeah, and
That's what
sometimes
I
we-
was worried about,
Yeah.
talking to you
Well-
beforehand and thinking, oh, how am I going to ever make this work?
Right.
And it hasn't been bad.
No, it has not been bad.
The
It's been-
speaker's been great about keeping things on track and making sure that we're not there until all
Seems
hours.
to be going very smoothly, but you don't have as many bills as we did. I think we had 1,600 bills.
Wow.
Yeah, I think so.
And-
And again, I think this year, I think a lot of the emphasis is on the committees. So you're seeing a lot of that testimony there, and things being ironed out there in committee.
Now, question for both of you, as freshmen, did you put any bills in this year?
No.
Now, they tell you not, I'll start by saying that they tell you not to the first year. I don't know if they told you that, but they told us not to sit back and watch and see how the process works before we put a bill in. So I didn't submit any. I co-joined a couple of bills last year, but I didn't actually submit any. So that's why I was asking if you guys were brave enough to actually.
Well, I mean, just like the rest of you, I co-sponsored a bill that's actually been passed and signed by the governor.
Potato bill.
Yeah, yep.
That's
I was a co-sponsor. I think we're all
all,
co-sponsors. And then Betsy she helped me with an amendment on a transportation bill which passed both the House and the Senate. So now it's waiting for the governor, or it becomes law automatically. So. And that was a joint effort that we put forth.
One thing that I didn't expect, and it was just, I should have expected it, but, you know, because the House is controlled by the Democrats and the Senate's controlled by the Republicans.
Right.
And so I'd feel really good when we would pass a bill out of the House, and then, you know, a few weeks later I hear that it's died in the Senate.
Well, that's we call it the firewall, the Republican firewall.
Right.
Yeah, it was a little bit different for us because when we were freshmen, we actually had both
houses.
chambers. So
Right. By veto-proof majorities.
Right.
Yeah,
yes.
and there were a lot of calls for that, and a lot of us were not, you know, like we asked if you had pressure. We had lots of pressure on us for certain bills, and whether you caved into the pressure or you didn't. And you know, I personally pride myself in not caving into it, because if you're a person of your word and you give somebody your word, then if you don't have your word, you have nothing.
right,
So,
right, and I agree. And I always say to people, you know, I look at what the town of Derry would want, you know, and sometimes they would be like, well, you can't do that. You got to think about this and that. And I always say, you know, it says representative of Derry.
Derry.
And those are the people that elect me. So sometimes, you know, when these hard bills come up, and you gotta sit back and say, what's right for the town of Derry, you know?
Oh, last year we would run out into the ante room and we'd get everybody together. Okay, what's
What are we
this for
supposed to
Derry?
vote on
What's
it?
going to happen to Derry if we vote for this? Because we didn't know, we were freshmen, and so we'd find out and we'd ask, like, you know, Frank Separato was real good at knowing, because he was in the Ways and Means, so he knew exactly how it was going to affect us.
What was the constitutional amendment for the education?
For education,
Piece, you know, how was
so.
that going to work? And we all know that Derry is the third largest school district in the state. So, I think the Derry delegation 2 years ago, again, basically said we're going to do what's right for the town of Derry.
And there was tremendous pressure on that for us.
We're talking about pressure and, you know, deciding how to vote. I agree with what you're saying and what Betsy has said. It's important that, at least to me, that I vote not the way that necessarily I get the most emails on,
Right.
but the way that I believe the people of Derry would vote if they were in my place.
Right.
Because so many times, like Betsy said, after I hear the testimony, after I hear the pros and cons, I change my vote. And I think that, you know, other people in Derry, if they knew more about the bill, they might understand.
Yeah,
vote differently.
Another thing, you mentioned emails. We get bombarded with hundreds to maybe thousands of emails, and it depends on the issue too as they start coming in. Certain issues, like for instance, I'm on Fish and Game. You haven't seen any of the emails I got yet, but you're going to start getting them soon. I'm going to tell you right now. Yeah, it's going to,
I've got lots on
because it's
the
going
bill.
to. Well, you wait. There's going to be a lot
Those
more.
automatically generated ones from
Somebody
the
goes to a
website.
website, clicks on it, and it automatically generates the email. And then next thing you know, you open up your email and you got 105 in there, and you're looking, it all says the same exact thing. And you know, you kind of scan through them to see who's from Derry, and you answer them. But the thing is, it's very difficult because now instead of taking you know 20 minutes to do it, you're spending an hour just looking through your emails to see who's from Derry, you know, that you might be able to respond to, because you can't respond to everyone.
Yeah, although I think you try to.
No, I just respond to people from Derry.
Okay, yeah, I do too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It may take me a while, but I do eventually get to it.
Right.
The same here. You just can't, and then depending on how contentious the bill is, like the loan bill was a big one. Now that's going to hit the floor, I think, next time we're in there. But if that and gambling hits the same thing, we'll be there until midnight, because the loan bill right now, I can tell you right now, is I have an amendment in on the loan bill to change it, because I think it needs to be a little longer to take effect, to give the people time to sell off their inventory, you know, so that the businesses don't take a hit. So I'm trying to push it back to the original time frame that the Senate, when they introduced it last year. So that's all my amendment does. It doesn't change anything but the time frame, so it gives, the businesses won't lose any money, you know, and they shouldn't have to lose money.
So
Because the loons aren't dying.
So the loon bill is going to take us till midnight.
Between the
and
loon
locked
and the
in. We'll be
gambling
all
at the
locked in
same,
front
the
of the
loons and the gambling on the
Ah,
same day,
Yeah.
the loon bill will probably be a couple of hours.
So it's been voted out of your committee. What was the committee vote?
The committee vote, it was almost tie.
Really?
The committee chair was the decision.
Wow.
And you just never know how the chips are going to fall.
Right.
One of the bills in transportation that Brian and I voted on opposite sides of is child restraint and booster seats.
I put an amendment in for
kids.
that one.
And it was also very closely split in our House committee. The big debate was around the age. The bill increases the age of the child that is required to be in a booster seat and the height.
Height requirement, right.
And it was hotly contested in our committee, and it ended up not having a recommendation because it ended up being a tie vote. It went to the Senate.
They
the
increased
Republican
the height and
firewall.
the weight.
They put it back to the original
Yes, yeah.
to the original height, and the Senate is Republican. They voted that through on a voice vote. It wasn't even
Wow.
contested. It was unanimous in the committee, and it was voted through on a voice
That's a
vote.
big difference, because I had two of my bills pass the House with like 19-0 in the committee, in labor, and then went to the Senate with 5-0 the other way.
Yep.
So
So there's just
You
That's
just
what I
don't
mean.
know.
Yeah, you never know.
So you never know which way.
yeah,
it's
I
gonna
think
go.
it's sort of the non-political ones that are very unpredictable, because you don't necessarily have a partisan record to base any guesses on.
Well, another one was the lobster bill, right? Kept being able to
Yeah.
catch a couple
Oh
of
my
lobsters.
goodness, yeah.
That was another controversial one.
Got a lot of
Yeah.
emails on that one
Yeah.
too. Yeah.
It's interesting.
Did that one end up passing? I don't remember.
It passed the House. I don't know whether it's passed the Senate.
Well, yeah, I don't think it did last time. So these bills, see, I'm in Fish and Game, and they've already come up. All these bills, the loan bill has come up. This is like, I think, the third time it's been up. And, you know, and basically the information that was presented to us in committee this time was the exact same information as before. They just changed the dates. But because I still have it all.
That was one of the things that surprised me, because I'd think, oh, I'm going to introduce this bill, and then I find out, well, it's been introduced into every legislature for the past 10 years, and if you want to read the history, we'll give you the history.
Yeah, the research is real good about that.
Oh, research is
Let's
great.
talk about the budget. We talked about that probably about a month ago, right? And I don't know, the message that I took from there was some downshifting on the county taxes side.
Yeah,
in the
our
budget.
show actually,
So
that
I had some concern about that, but it appeared that the budget basically fell on party lines. As a matter of fact, I think
it fell exactly on party
exactly.
lines.
Not one Republican voted for the budget.
Right. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, the
Well,
budget itself.
Yeah, so how do the Republicans plan on being fiscally responsible if you vote down the whole budget?
Well, you got to look at the current budget that's in place right now. You actually have a surplus because it's a Republican budget. And it's going to carry over.
No.
That Republican budget is going to carry over.
Whatever.
But no, but it's the same budget that's been in place, and it's been working. It was a balanced budget, and it's working. But the problem is you added a lot of stuff to it,
Working for
though.
who? Let's go back to that.
Yeah.
Well, let's go back because
it decimated services to our most vulnerable citizens.
There were a lot of cuts that
It may
shouldn't
be
have been
working
made.
on the spreadsheet at the state level, but it's not working for the individuals in our
But,
state.
but keep in mind, the Republicans 2 years ago basically had an $800 million hole to fix.
Right.
That's a tall order.
Oh,
And
it
you
is
know,
indeed.
When you're trying to stay afloat, and I think the state as a whole has really weathered the recession pretty well. The Republicans a couple of years ago made some tough decisions. There's no doubt about it, you know. And it is a different budget now. The economy's
picking up.
Seems like it's picking up a little bit, but I think that we not only filled that $800 million hole, there was a surplus at the end of that. So I understand
Well,
that.
you filled some holes and you created others. The cigarette tax, dropping the cigarette tax did not
dropped that.
have the
That ended up
intended.
being-
That didn't work out so
That
well.
didn't work out so well.
But that had a sunsetting factor, and it basically said if it didn't work, we'll put it back. But on
And
the
it
flip
didn't
side of
work.
that, but now we're talking on this budget, we're talking about raising taxes. You know, in the budget, there's a lot of taxes that are raised. So.
And there's a lot of being, like you said, the county. Now going back down to the county, if any of this money goes back down to the county, that increases our property taxes automatically. Any increase to the county will affect every property owner in Derry. Because I'm on the executive committee in the Rockingham County, and we don't want to see any changes like that because now we're going to have to compensate for that.
So how does that work? I wonder, because as I was talking to some other people, they would all say, oh, you know, our county meeting's going to have to deal with this budget now and blah, 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 blah. And I think, well, Rockingham passed their budget 2 or 3 weeks ago.
Well,
And,
this,
how does that
but
work?
See, the way it works is on the executive committee. One of the things that we passed when we passed the budget was to allow the executive committee to raise it.
I see.
So if something like this happens and we run short, we have the ability to raise it a certain amount.
Right.
So that's basically what's going on. You know, so if all of a sudden it's going to cost us an extra $1 million to the county, Rockingham County, then that money has to be distributed in property tax values. So.
Right.
I think that the budget and the needs of our citizens is the most important issue that faces the state legislature. And it is recurring every term, every
2 years.
term it comes up.
Yeah, that's the beauty of New Hampshire's legislature.
And none of us want to pay more taxes, regardless of what people think of Democrats. We don't want to pay more taxes either. We work hard for our money and we'd like to keep it in our pockets. But when you start to talk to people one-on-one about, okay, then what would you cut? People don't want things cut. And so then how do you balance that? I don't want to pay more taxes, but I don't want things cut. What's the answer? I mean, and that's what's on our shoulders as state representatives.
Yeah, actually, I went to one of the budget hearings, public hearings in Nashua, and I kept track of the 75 people or so who testified. And of those, only 5 talked about revenue sources. The other 70 talked about we need this and we need this
Yeah.
and we need this.
Well, that's what you find a lot of. We needs.
That's right.
Right. Everybody needs something,
Right.
right? Especially when you're a state legislator, you
And so
seem to
don't
find
cut
out.
that. You can cut what those other people need, but you can't cut what I
Right.
need. So
Well,
if you've
I
got,
tell you, I didn't vote for the Republican budget. I was one of the 26 Republicans that did not vote for the Republican budget
Last year.
Last year. So, and the reason why is because there was some cuts to certain programs that I thought that they shouldn't have done, because they were minor little cuts, like $50,000 here and $150 there. And to me, that was like, you're going to cut that program that's saving you money to get the $50,000. You know, it didn't make sense to me, fiscal sense to me, that you're going to cut something that's like the CHINS program. It's a great program. Keeps people out of the jail system. The jail costs us, $35,000 a year to put somebody in jail. So if you can keep a kid out of jail, you already made your money back. 2 kids don't go to jail, you make your money
Yeah,
back.
the budgets, we think of them as dollars and cents, but actually the budget is the description of your priorities. What,
Yeah.
What you think the state should be doing for its citizens.
It's a
And
good way of putting it, Mary. So we're going to be winding down shortly. I think we got like 10 minutes or so, but let me ask you both, what do you think, what's the most important issue for you as a state rep? Either we've talked about it or maybe upcoming, or that you'd like to talk about. I mean, what's an area that you'd really want to make a difference in?
something that is not necessarily related to the state legislature itself, but is really important to me. I don't know that either of the two of you went, but a few weeks ago, Mary and I both went and spoke to the freshman government classes at Pinkerton. And I started out, the periods that I was there for, I started out asking how many of them were looking forward to voting when they got old enough. Hardly anyone.
Right, right.
Well, I
And
could
so I
tell you
started
that.
talking about, would you vote if that person could make a decision about what you had to wear to school every day? And everybody wants to vote then. And so I started talking about, the issues that we are deciding on and your federal government are deciding on are far more important than what you get to wear every day. It's your privacy issues, it's your money coming out of your wallet. And I was stunned at how few of them that indicated an interest in voting and civic life. That's concerning to me.
Yeah, good point. What about you, Mary?
well, I don't know if it's the most important, but one of the reasons that I selected or put down election law as one of my committees was because I think it is vitally important not only that people vote, but that everybody who can vote does vote, and that the votes are counted accurately. I'm really concerned that with computers counting votes, we're ignoring the section of our law that says you have to count the votes in public. How can you count the votes on a computer in public? And so I want to work to try to figure out how we can verify for the public that the machine count is correct. I don't want to go back to counting every single vote by hand, but there are ways, and there are other states that are doing this.
I think you're going to find the machines that we use are very accurate, and one of the reasons is we actually had a recall vote.
A recount, and I think we're running out of time here, but we did a recount, and the machines were very, very accurate. Okay,
Yeah,
when we did it, they were within like 5 or 6 votes. Because I participated, so did Brian in the recount.
There was 17,000. We had to count them by hand, and
Well,
it was amazing
this
how
was
accurate.
this election, right?
This
Yeah,
past election.
Yeah, but I was amazed everybody's vote count changed.
Well, it's going to change,
I
and
could
there
tell
are
you-
reasons for that. But
And,
that's
know
right.
there are reasons
and if
for
you
it,
do
but-
the recount, you'd see the reasons. Because I could
Right,
tell you,
I'm
I'll
not
tell
saying
you,
that it
I'll
was-
tell you
I
exactly what
don't-
happened on
I
some
don't
of those
think there was
votes.
any fraud involved, but I think that
No.
it's important that the vote count be correct.
I think the machines were more accurate than the
They
recount.
are. They
We'll
are.
see.
Yeah,
We'll
they are.
see.
And we'll talk about it
Yeah.
after the show's over.
Okay.
But,
Yeah, so anyway, I think we're pretty much out of time. We're just about, I'm getting the warning that we're a couple of minutes. So I might as well start now with the closing so I don't have to worry about the editing problem.
Well, thank you very much for the
Yeah, we
invitation to
appreciate
be
you
here.
coming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes,
Great
We'll have you again, I'm sure.
It's
Yeah,
been
sure.
enjoyable, and it's always great getting a chance to talk to the other Derry reps because I think it's important. I mean, we all represent the same people, and I think that it's important
Right.
we work together.
Absolutely.
Okay, and I'll close with, this has been the Derry Legislators Lounge, and we have a website, which is www.derrylounge.com. We have a Facebook page where you can find us if you search for Legislators Lounge. We also have a YouTube channel that says Legislators Lounge. So if you go to any of those, you can find us on there, and all our past shows are on there. Like we discussed, many of the shows that have already gone. This is our 7th show, and we look forward to doing many more. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you for having
Thank you.
us.
Thank you. Good.